Hi, and welcome to Dani After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight is the November Book Club book review, and I did post a StreamYard link in the chat that I did pin. So if anybody has read the book and wanted to come up and be a part of this review, feel free to do so. The book we are doing this month is Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice by Virginia Roberts Guiffre. So I am really excited to go over this with y'all. I do see Zach Kopp backstage trying to get connected. So give him a few minutes to do that. While Zach is getting connected, because I have a lot of notes, and I actually condensed them. So I feel like tonight's going to be a long show, but that's okay because there's so much to discuss, and Epstein is very central in the news media again. So we need to do that. So while I give Zach a second to finish setting up, I will read the back cover. So for anybody who's unfamiliar with this, so what the back cover says is, years ago, a teacher asked one of our children what their mother did for a living. My husband and I decided they should simply answer, "My mom fights bad guys." Since then, more than one teacher has wrongly assumed I am a cop. I'm not a cop. I've never claimed to be an angel either. But I hope I have done some good. I spent more than 2 years traveling the world with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I knew their cruel habits and those of the men to whom they trafficked me. Seeking to silence me, my powerful enemies have threatened to bankrupt me and even to have me killed. I haven't stopped talking. When I was a sex slave, I had said I had no say. I will never have no say again. So that is the back cover, which like right away kind of draws you into, she's already saying Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, this is what my story is going to be. And then the inside cover gives a little bit more information, and we'll go over that as well. But before we do that, welcome friend of the show, Zach Kopp. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing all right. Nice to see you, Dani.
Good to see you as well. So I know that you were a big supporter of this book being, I mean, this book was voted on by a landslide, but I know when it was kind of mentioned that this was going to be a possibility, I remember you being like, yes, that book.
Well, yeah, it seems like it's the kind of book that people are sort of obliged to know the contents of. Like, not so much from a literary standpoint, but just because you're a member of this society and it's like a hidden layer of activity that needs exposure.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of how I felt about it. Like, I felt like mandated to know what was in that book.
Very well said. Did you make it through the whole book already?
Just finished it today. I've been having a crunch. Other issues have been sort of been impinging on my state of mind, so it was kind of a race, but I finished it earlier today.
Awesome. So this is fresh in your memory.
Yeah, and I've got it here. I don't take notes like you do. I know you do, and If you would, give me page numbers along the way so I can refer to what you're talking about.
I don't do page numbers in my notes, but what I did do was just to keep myself on track, I kind of broke my notes down by chapter, and I figure I would kind of
Okay,
go through.
that'll help. That'll help.
Yeah, I would
I'm
figure just
sorry. I
some
mean, you
chapters
don't
I
have
only have
to.
a couple of things. So maybe I'll, kind of go through and be like, say, talk about the first few chapters and then be like, Zach, what
Yeah,
did
all
I
right.
miss? Cool. And if at any point you're like, Dani, don't forget to talk about this, or I took this, you know what I mean? Because there's so much in here
I
that
know.
different
We'll
things
be
can.
conversational about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just finished reading the back cover while you were getting set up. So
Okay.
the inside cover, I want to read as well because I think that's equally as important. So what that says, let me get my notes here, is the unforgettable memoir by the late Virginia Roberts Giuffre, the woman who dared to take on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The world knows Virginia Roberts Giuffre as Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's most outspoken victim, the woman whose decision to speak out helped send both serial abusers to prison, whose photograph with Prince Andrew catalyzed his fall from grace. But her story has never been told in full, her own words, until now. In April 2025, Giuffre took her own life. She left behind a memoir written in the years preceding her death and stated unequivocally that she wanted it published. Nobody's Girl is the riveting and powerful story of an ordinary girl who would grow up to confront extraordinary adversity. Here, Giuffre offers an unsparing and definitive account of her time with Epstein and Maxwell, who trafficked her and others to numerous prominent men. She also details the molestation she suffered as a child, as well as her daring escape from Epstein and Maxwell's grasp at 19. Giuffre remade her life from scratch and summoned the courage to not only hold her abusers to account, but also to advocate for other victims. The pages of Nobody's Girl preserves her voice and her legacy forever. Nobody's Girl is an astonishing affirmation of Giuffre's unshakable will first to claw her way out of victimhood and then to shine light on wrongdoing and fight for a safer, fairer world. Equal parts intimate and fierce, it is a remarkable narrative of fortitude in the face of depravity and despair. And then it just adds at the very end, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, 1983 to 2025, was an activist and advocate for sex trafficking survivors. She lived in Australia with her family. So I felt that was extremely spot on and just so slightly touched on everything that the book's going to go through.
I'd say the book's theme is reclamation of personhood, because she's not treated like a person with any dignity. She describes it as being passed around. I don't know if that was in the book or an interview. It passed around as a platter of fruit, and that's not dignity. That's not respect. And I think she did a great job of reclaiming her personhood.
Very well
But
said.
yeah, all the details are in there for sure in that jacket blurb. But
So,
yeah, wow, what a life. And she committed suicide, and then it comes out that her husband, who she's talking about all through the book as this brave, rock of support, and I'm sure it wasn't all bad. Maybe nobody really knows what happened. I'm sure the book's been edited selectively, but it doesn't withhold the essence of its points that it's making at all.
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was in the back of my mind. Honestly,
Yeah, I don't mean to come out all wild like that, but I mean that's a
but
flaw.
it's the truth of
Yeah,
where her husband was to her during the book and her writing that, and then where their relationship was at the end. Very, very different.
yeah. And I mean, like, I don't want to condemn the guy. I don't really know what happened, but I did find a thought-provoking article. I can send you the link after this is over.
Yes, please. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just a tragedy, right? But I feel like she's achieved redemption, at least in consciousness, like on the level of mass consensus understanding. But who knows? Who knows what'll happen? Where it's a really crazy time we're in.
Yeah, and the fact that this book came out just when Epstein is like very back and central in the headlines again,
Mm.
I've wondered how this book, how people will take this book maybe now, so many years later. And we're going to get through how
Good
she
point.
was perceived by the media for so long and during points in time. And I would just, in my mind, I hope that maybe people are able to take a step back and look at whether they read the book or not and just look at her in a different light
Well,
because
yeah. Sorry,
well,
I
please
don't
go
mean to
ahead.
raise my voice, but no, I mean because like if you're a sensitive person, you understand that there's a person involved, but what you get in the headlines is just kind of like a character, like one-dimensional character who's like questionable morality and like who knows what the hell. And I think she did a fine job of fleshing out all the details of her childhood and her affectionate relationship with her brother, the crazy perverted father, the weird, disaffected mother. Anyway, you are probably going to proceed through this in a more orderly manner. So I'll stand back.
So the structure. So the book is 367 pages and there are 8 pages of color photos. And the photos chosen for this book, I do think each of them were extremely um, powerful in kind of recapping the different times that Virginia walks us through. To me, when I was kind of going through photos, because some of them are you've seen time and time again through the media. But
Mm.
Zach, I don't know which photo stood out to you, but the one for me was the one at Naomi Campbell's party.
From the side, like in a crowd.
Yes. When Virginia's just kind of there, and you see Ghislaine right there as well. But
Yeah,
it's very clear when this picture kind of went public. It's like, wait a minute, that was a child.
yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
that
clearly a
I hadn't
child.
seen that photo before. So how I missed it, I don't know.
No, I
But
had only seen the famous Andrew photo,
mm,
I
yeah.
hadn't seen that.
Oh,
And
and we'll
so,
get to Andrew.
yeah, I'm
Trust me,
sure.
we'll get to Andrew.
What a trip.
So the book has 38 chapters. So again, I have some notes through each. So I'll kind of go through a few, and then Zach, if there's something that I missed or you want to add on or kind of further go through, we'll do that. So right away in the introduction, we learn that Virginia goes by the name Jenna. So a lot of times in the book, she's referred to when she's kind of describing situations being referred to as Jenna. I personally will just refer to her as Virginia because that's kind of, I don't know her on that level to call her Jenna, but she goes by Jenna. So we learn that Virginia is, at the time the book starts, 15 years old in Miami. She escapes a juvenile detention center. She accepts a ride from someone in a white van who ultimately raped her. She is then picked up by a 63-year-old Ron Eppinger in a limo. He has a woman with him. He's wealthy. He takes her, clothes shopping, buys her lingerie, and he says to her, quote, "I can be your new daddy," end quote. At his home, there are several other young girls. He had her sleep with him in his bed. He said he ran a modeling agency, but in fact, he was offering a service of $1,000 a night for an escort. So we kind of jump to, in the next chapter, she talks about as she calls it, a tough love treatment center called Growing Together.
Oh, yeah.
Her mom had dropped her off a year before saying like, "Oh, we're just on our way to the eye doctor," and then just shoved her off and left. Virginia's mom declared her as out of control. She was once a hardworking student, but now an angry, defiant, and prone to emotional meltdowns teenager. She would party, drink, do drugs. The thing is, Virginia's mom never asked why she was rebelling. Her mom always took out her own frustrations on her daughter, but never on her brothers, particularly her brother who has the nickname Skydie. So staff at this facility, I mean, Virginia kind of talks about it and sprinkles things in here and there about this facility. It was a horror place, horror.
Staff members were either ineffectual or cruel.
Mm-hmm.
It's
The staff made the girls who were 13 to 17 years old stand in front of a mirror. And I don't want to repeat the sentence, but it's bad. It's very bad. Virginia had opened up in therapy about the abuse she had suffered from her mom, as well as how she had been raped and what she endured specifically 2 months before this by two boys who took turns. The thing is, the place called Growing Together would ended up being written about in an expose in the New York Times years later. The article talked about how for years, kids who went there endured beatings, restraint, imprisonment, and systematic humiliation. Old comer kids were put in charge of like the newcomer kids.
right, the old
So
guy.
there was less staff to pay. Kids, I mean, there was a lot of rape, gang rape, assault. Friday nights, the parents would visit, which you would think, okay, this is the parents' chance to see the bad treatment of their child. No, 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 no. And even the setup, I'm like, how did no one question this? The parents would be at one side of a room, the kids at the other, and the parents had a microphone and would say in that microphone all of their kids' faults. And the kids just had to stand there and take it. They could not argue back. And then the kids had to sing in a group this little chant that's, quote, I am a promise, I am a possibility, unquote. The kids were forced to write journals, but then everything they wrote in their journals would be then turned against them. So Virginia, what she would do was run away, and she ran away several times from that facility. Anything?
Well, the
I
thing
missed
about shouting all their faults at them reminds me of Jolly West's psychic driving. You know the
Interesting.
psychic driving MK Ultra thing where they just bombard you with like you're worthless, you're a clown, and they do it for hours and hours on headphones on LSD. I mean, I guess these girls were probably not on LSD, but the same theme, same kind of punishment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an excellent connotation.
I'm always reading multiple books at once, so I make these connections. I don't mean to throw you off course.
No, I do the same thing. So chapter 3 goes into a bit more where Zach had kind of referenced in the beginning, which was Virginia's family and growing up. And there's a lot to this. So Virginia talks about the background of her family, her parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. She talks about when she was born and, her family having moved around. Virginia's mother loved having a baby girl, and then she had her son. And Virginia, throughout the book, there's different and it makes sense because the relationship was so complex, but there's different tones. Like at some points in the book, she speaks very revering. Is that the word of her? But then in other times,
Of her mother, well, yeah, but that's an honest sort of dual relationship that you would have with a, fucked up situation like that.
Yeah.
Pardon me, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please. Virginia talks about how she still has the baby book that her mother had made her. Virginia had to clean the house and kind of pack her and her brother's lunches. She did so much, but then Virginia also would say, but my brothers didn't have to do any of that. Her parents, they had vices. They would drink. Her dad would use money to buy whatever he wanted on a whim, beer, a pickup truck, a construction project. One day when Virginia was a kid, her dad got a horse and named this horse Alice and said it was a gift for Virginia. And Virginia loved that horse and looked forward to riding her every single day. So there were some kind of great, wonderful times. However, everything started to change. So Skydie started sleeping, her younger brother started sleeping in their parents' room. And that's when Virginia said, that's when my mom kind of stopped doing a lot of things. She stopped doing my bath time and she stopped putting me to bed. But that's when my dad took over that. And she talks about how, and I feel like the show, just disclaimer, there's a lot of sexual abuse and incest that will be talked about in this episode, because we can't not talk about it in this book review. So if this is like a trigger, and people don't want to tune in for this review, like, I totally get it. Just disclaimer, put that
And
out
try
there.
not to pour over every detail.
I was very, yes. It's hard because I will say this book is very detailed. Like, Virginia isn't just like, I'm going to tell my story. It's, I'm going to tell it in as much detail so everybody understands what I've been through.
Yeah, it's sort of like a mission statement in that sense. Like, it's really a gesture.
Yeah. She's not just like blanket statement everything. She's just, here's what happens. Like, no shame, no nothing. Just, here's my story. So, okay, now that I've said that, so again, her dad started taking over that task. And one night during bath time, he wanted to make sure she was extra clean. He then started going, putting her to bed and things. At first he would touch her. And she kind of is specific as to how things then escalated from there. I'll say that. Virginia tried to say to her parents she didn't want bath time anymore. She didn't want those bedtime cuddles anymore. She was a big girl, so that she didn't need that. So the bath time and the being put to bed stopped, but that didn't stop her dad from coming into her room at night and ultimately forcing himself upon her. And he would threaten to take Alice, Virginia's beloved horse, away if she tried to hide from him or say no. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't go to her mother about this because her mom, who was once very loving to her, was now completely cold. And her mother would actually make statements like, I don't even think you're my daughter. Virginia would get UTIs all the time, and the doctors took note of this. And actually, at one point, the doctor said, her hymen is broken. And her mom was like, oh, well, it's because she rides horses bareback. So that's why. And then just to kind of add another layer to this. So her dad had this friend that went by the name Forrest. So he came around a lot, and the kids would call him Uncle Forrest. And he had a 16-year-old daughter named Sheila. And one night they did a reverse sleepover where Sheila stayed at Virginia's house and Virginia stayed at Forrest's house. Needless to say, Forrest raped her. And it actually turned out that Forrest had been sexually abusing his daughter, Sheila, as well. Virginia talks about the type of a sexual assault that she had at the hands of Forrest. And again, Virginia's mom, so she would say at times as well that she felt that Virginia was actually trying to steal her dad away from her, which, what a statement.
What a twisted mind. Oh my God. And she's like jealous of her daughter because her husband has started raping her daughter, and she doesn't blame the culprit but the victim. Crazy shit. Yeah. People really have a way.
Well, that's the thing too. So like, that's kind of up in the air too. Like, Virginia never says my mom knew this was happening, but she also doesn't say my mom didn't know.
It seems like she must have, though. I mean, because what other... I mean, no, she doesn't. It seems like it's implicit, though, because, like, what other motivation would there be for the mother to say whatever the first one she said, and then, like, to think, oh, don't believe you're my daughter, and then think you're stealing your dad away from me. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry for my continual outbursts.
No, please. I want you to add to this because again, I'm sure there's stuff that I didn't pick up that, but so one night Sheila's mom calls Virginia's mom about Forrest, saying that Forrest got his daughter pregnant. So Sheila got her pregnant. Well, it turns out Sheila was pregnant, but it was by her boyfriend, but no one believed her. And so for a while, it was like this big thing where for a while Virginia's dad moved out, but then Virginia was sent to live with her mom, Aunt Carol, in California. And in Virginia's mind, this was her mom choosing somebody else over her daughter. So you're choosing my dad against me. So Virginia ran away to San Francisco. Aunt Carol called Virginia's dad and said, you know what, just take her back. When Virginia got home, her beloved horse Alice was gone. Her dad, they sold it when Virginia left. But Virginia makes the point that at this point coming back, the sexual abuse stopped. However, there was now a camping family reunion, and Virginia went. And there was a kids event. And she talks about how her dad was drunk, and Virginia was walking with just a boy, and Virginia's dad saw them and called her a slut and threw her in the van. So when they got back to the campground with the entire family there, in front of everyone, he was calling her a whore and a slut. And Virginia said in front of all of them, quote, "So you're the only one that gets to fuck me," end quote. And she proceeded to say how he had been having sex with her for years. And when I say having sex, that makes it sound consensual. It wasn't. So how did her dad react? He beat the shit out of her in front of everybody, in front of their entire family, extended family, beat her, punched her in the face, dragged her back to the camper where he continued to beat her. And the next morning, everyone in the family acted like nothing ever happened. That's fucked. Like, yeah. Shame on every single family member who heard that and who saw that and did nothing. Like, it made me so outrageous. Like, so outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much happiness in this book. It reads very well. So it wasn't a chore like it could have been, but yeah, it's not very uplifting.
Yeah.
But maybe that's like a punch that everyone needs. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want them not to read it when I say that. That's not a good selling point. But.
No, I think a different way to phrase it, if I'm understanding you correctly, Zach, would be she didn't just lead a kind of quote unquote normal life and then fall into the realm of Epstein and Ghislaine. There was so much trauma.
And like no redemption, and then the illusion of redemption. Well, maybe, I don't know. I guess she didn't really even get the illusion of redemption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, wow, sorry.
There was just, so much trauma leading up that by the time she met them, it kind of, and to me, it's, again, just kind of keeping in mind what predators do and what type of victims they target. They're very strategic. They're going to pick someone who it doesn't have as easy of a go to say, no, this isn't right, because whether it's financial or whatnot, or broken home, there's just so many like boxes that they're checking off of like what type of victim would be the most easy to, I don't know what the word is, take advantage of.
I don't know how that sense manifests in their minds, but I remember Manson picks up Squeaky Frome when she's sitting on the curb, and it reminds me of Eppinger in the white van coming across. Maybe, I mean, they do. I mean, it's hard to even identify to the level of understanding, but like maybe they're just driving around looking for girls sitting on curbs looking sad. It's probably not quite that cut and dried, though. Yeah. Well, I guess it could be.
Right. So in regards to Virginia, just jumping back to, so now she's starting middle school, and she talks about the story. Okay, Zach, I really want to hear your thought on this. So she comes home from school one day, and Forrest, Uncle Forrest, is sitting on the porch with her dad. Well, he has become a born-again Christian. He had Virginia get on his knees again, her dad, Virginia's dad's right there, and says she needs to ask for God's forgiveness for what she did to him and to her dad.
Psycho.
Like, and so with that, so Forrest knows about what her dad has done to her too. So it's just like birds of a feather flock together.
I guess like some people turn it the opposite direction and use Christianity as a way to make themselves feel crucified instead of resurrected. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like it sounds like that's his logic here is like, well, you're the temptress and you caused us to go astray from whatever we would have done otherwise. It's just some kind of bizarre, like elaborate justification.
Yeah.
Like a religious justification.
So needless to say, again, still everything that she's going through, she starts skipping schools. She was into sports. She started skipping basketball practice. She ran away from home several times. She would stay at friends' houses most of the time. She then, and this is in chapter 6, she kind of jumps back and recalls the time with Eppinger, as Zach had just pointed out about him. So what she describes is that he trafficked her to his friends. She also was forced to have sex with him, and that increasingly became more violent. He also said she said law enforcement was on to him at one point. So he sent her away to a horse ranch where she was then forced to have sex with the owner. But she was able to kind of compartmentalize. She didn't use that word. I'm using that word because she loved horses. So she loved being around them. Even though she wasn't allowed to ride them, it was kind of like, okay, there's something to me that I love. I'm making the best of this fucked up situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the end, that guy, Eppinger, would ultimately get found out for what he was doing. But let's see. He had actually held her captive for nearly 6 months before he gave her away to his friend. That guy was in his 50s. He would bring her around to clubs and say she was his girlfriend. One night when the place was raided, his home was raided, Virginia was next to him in bed naked. So the police officers, they grilled her asking, what had he done to her? And that interrogation happened, and then they called her dad. So her dad had to come pick her up, which, could have been a moment for him to say, oh my God, what did my daughter go through? No, what do you think he did? He called her, quote, a goddamn slut and a fucking whore, end quote. But then he cried, which to me, fuck you with the tears. He said to her, well, you know what? Mom doesn't want you to come back home. So he was going to send her back to that group home growing together.
Again, and I think that's another manifestation of the psycho jealousy thing where she doesn't blame the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Yep.
I mean, like, you get that, right?
So Virginia did escape growing together, and she called her dad and said, let me talk to mom. So they did that. She went back home, talked to her mom, and for a little bit of time, I don't want to say things were okay with her mom because they were never okay, but she says I was allowed to stay for a little bit. But she noticed her once bedroom was now turned into an office. And when her mother first saw her, she slapped her in the face. Her mom had also said, you know what, you're not welcome here anymore. But Skydie was so happy to see her and hugged her. Let's see. Virginia stayed at the house of a girl she had met at growing together, but that didn't last very long. But the girl had a stepbrother named Michael, and Michael is going to be a little bit of a key figure in Virginia's story. Because Michael was like, well, you can just live with me. He had an apartment. He was a manager at Taco Bell, and he got her a job too. So they started having sex, even though she had no romantic feelings for him. Valentine's Day in 2000, Michael asked her to marry him. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. They lived in that apartment until they were evicted. They were now homeless. Virginia said to her parents, can me and Michael stay? And they actually said yes. However, they had to stay in a travel trailer parked in the back horse paddock. But Virginia was, she was doing things herself. She was working. She had a job at a pet store. She says at this point, her and her parents, their relationship was cordial. She left that job to go to a different pet store, but that place shut down. So then she was unemployed. This is when the summer of 2000 happens. And her dad was a maintenance guy at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach. And so her dad got her a job there. And let's see, one day she was walking right before her 17th birthday. And I just want to say it again, weeks before her 17th birthday, she was walking towards work and a car slowed down behind her. It was two people she hadn't met before. One of them was a British socialite named Ghislaine Maxwell, and the other was her driver, Juan Alessi. Before we jump into that, anything you want to add, Zach, or that I missed?
No, I don't think so. You're doing just fine.
All right. So now Virginia is sitting at the reception desk one day at work. She's reading a book about anatomy, and Ghislaine approaches her and says, hello, are you, sees what she's reading. Are you interested in doing massages? Ghislaine says, oh, I know a wealthy man, a longtime Mar-a-Lago member, and he's looking for a massage therapist to travel with. Virginia's like, well, I'm not trained, but one day I would hope to be. This lack of training meant nothing to Ghislaine, who said, you would be terrific and you should go on an interview. So Ghislaine says it's Virginia's desire to learn, which is the most important thing. And if Virginia impresses Ghislaine's friend, he'll pay for her to get officially trained. And she adds, he loves to help people. So Virginia's dad actually drove her to the house that night for the quote unquote interview. They were greeted by Ghislaine, who told her dad, don't worry, we will get her back home safe. And Virginia says, quote, Jeffrey has been waiting to meet you. So Ghislaine brought Virginia upstairs, and what she describes is a naked man laying face down on a green massage table, and he had a grin on his face. Ghislaine introduced her to Mr. Jeffrey Epstein, and he said, you can just call me Jeffrey. At this time, he was 47 years old. Virginia, taken aback, looked at Ghislaine for guidance. She didn't know what to do, but Virginia also didn't want to blow this opportunity. And she thought the fact that Ghislaine was here and wasn't reacting in a strange way to what was happening made the situation easier. Ghislaine instructed Virginia what to do in regards to the massage. So the lesson began. It gets a little graphic. I won't get heavily into that. In hindsight, Virginia says she could see how the two of them were breaking down her defenses, because anytime Virginia felt discomfort, she would look to Ghislaine, and Ghislaine would give her a glance like, you're overreacting. Everything's fine. Jeffrey would ask Virginia a bunch of questions. Are you in high school? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you on birth control? And then Jeffrey says, tell me about your first time. Virginia hesitated. But in her mind, Ghislaine's acting like this is normal, and she didn't want to blow this opportunity. So Virginia describes, I had a rough childhood, how she'd been abused by a family friend, and Epstein teased her about this, saying she was, quote, a naughty girl, end quote. Jeffrey, again, who was naked, lying on his stomach, then rolled onto his back. Again, Virginia looked to Ghislaine, and Ghislaine gave her that look, like completely unfazed. Virginia followed Ghislaine's examples with the massage. Then Ghislaine took off her clothes, instructed Virginia to, and then I'll just leave it at that, but it gets more graphic.
Push the blood away from the heart, Virginia. That's one of her instructions. You
Mm-hmm.
need to push the blood away from the heart. It's okay.
God, this is like one of it's like such
Yeah.
like you're reading it and this is a child who's looking to an adult for guidance and like, wait, this isn't normal, something's wrong here. And like us as adults reading this, it's like so obvious what Ghislaine is doing, and it's so fucked. But so after Epstein finished, Virginia was told to bring 2 warm washcloths to clean him up, and that was a central thing to that
She's a
process.
keeper, he told Maxwell, appraising me as if I weren't there.
Yep. I had that exact quote.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dani.
No. Great minds think alike. Yeah, that was what a thing to say. She's a keeper.
Like just oblivious to whatever her head is doing to her.
Mm-hmm. So Epstein had paid her $200 for this, and he said this is probably what you would make in 1 week at that spa. So Maxwell said also to Ghislaine, you did great, saying that she had, saying you have strong hands, good instincts, such huge potential. Like, I really want to, like, I'm trying to hold back in from swearing.
Wow.
So there will be times throughout the book where Virginia kind of will jump back to like the present time to kind of relate to something that like in her mind, but then we'll jump back. And I was
wondering how you were going to take that. I know you don't like jumping around in the timeline.
When it first started, and I was just like, oh gosh, but it made perfect sense because it was relating to something
there's good continuity.
Yes, it was very strategically done in a way that I was like, I got it. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with this. But right. Yeah, that was actually one of my notes too. That's funny, Zach, that you say that. But it also goes to show that, like, even though this happened so long ago and she'll kind of jump back to present, there are just little things. Like, so, Zach, the beginning of chapter 9, like, this part broke my heart. She talks about how she was clothes shopping with her daughter, and they see a display of oversized orange and yellow beach towels. And she purchased 6 of them. And she talks about how she has a near addiction to buying things like that, or buying sheets, pillowcases, towels. And her husband's always like, we have plenty. We don't need any more. But Virginia says, quote, but it's a feeling, even after all this time, I remember how dirty I felt, and I will do anything to make my world feel clean, end quote.
Yeah.
Virginia talks about how people question how she and right away she's just like, I'm putting this out there. People question how or why me and the other victims could go back after knowing what Epstein wanted. And Virginia right away was like, he was good at spotting girls who were vulnerable. Most had been through abuse already before they even encountered him. And just like clockwork, the very next day, Virginia, again, so Epstein wanted her again, and Virginia returned again with good intentions, but the same thing happened. Epstein would tell her he needed to climax at least 3 times a day. And at this point, Ghislaine and Epstein would instruct Virginia on what to do during sex, specifically including what men want. Virginia is a child still at this point. She's under 18. She is a child, and they're teaching her sex tips about what men want. So
it's just not good.
Yeah. Every time sorry, what was that?
Oh, I'm just saying, no excuse for that.
So
be justified.
Mm-hmm. Every time Epstein and Ghislaine were in Florida, Virginia would be at his home. Ghislaine, however, the third time she said she had to leave and would leave Virginia with Epstein on her own. Epstein, again, would take advantage of this. So sometimes it was just solo raping. I was about to say sex, but it's not consensual. Raping of Virginia. Sometimes when Ghislaine was there, she would join in. Sometimes she wouldn't. Or his assistant, Sarah Callan. And Epstein had this thing where he liked watching women have sex. 2 weeks later, he said to Virginia, why don't you quit your job at Mar-a-Lago and just work full-time for me? And he gave her $2,500 cash to find an apartment. And this was strategic because he knew if she was coming and going at his beck and call at all hours, it would tip off her parents and make them suspicious. But then again, with what we know about her parents, I don't know.
He's just covering all bases.
He is.
Are we in a very important man chapter right now?
Chapter 9.
Oh, we're still in 9. Okay.
So again, he gave her that money to get her own place because she had to be available to him all hours of the day, all hours of the night. Virginia contemplated, but Epstein, again, being 5 steps ahead, an adult, knowing how to manipulate somebody, he showed her a picture of her little brother, Skydie, and said, I know where he goes to school. So you must never tell anybody what we do, in that he owns the Palm Beach Police Department. And then Epstein also casually says, oh, I knew Eppinger. Remember the guy in the white limo from earlier? Yeah, birds of a feather flock together, right?
Well, this guy, I'm serious, man. He was connected with so much shit besides just his weird sex trafficking ring. Like he was apparently an intelligence agent, and he was making deals with Saudi Arabians. I did some like adjunct research. I'll send you that link too. But yeah.
In a lot of the stuff that's a good point, Zach, that you mentioned that's coming out now isn't. She doesn't know this at the time.
I'm slapping it all together.
Well, I mean, but we're also, I think it's an excellent point that you do that because we're looking at it through the lenses of us in 2025, and we need to, reading this, go back to 2000 when this is, or whatever year it was. We know when she's a 17-year-old girl and this is happening. Very different, very. And we all know Epstein now. We all know Ghislaine now.
I add that to my understanding of the character, and like then he's relating to her on this level, but like meanwhile he's this weird connected guy, and it just makes me think about like the overall global network, politically speaking, and just how much of this kind of shit must be endemic to it. Like maybe he's just kind of like a limited hangout, like, oh, we'll give you Epstein, And meanwhile, I don't even want to speculate.
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting at, though?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Virginia, she's now turning 17. She does use the money that Epstein gives her to get her own apartment, and her fiance, Michael, moves in with her. She talks about this was very much a relationship of convenience, and he never questioned Virginia why she left at night for work. And the thing is, Virginia's mother actually questioned, gee, why would Epstein and Ghislaine hire their daughter with no credentials? But then it never went anywhere. They just kind of thought that, but then didn't do anything. Virginia now talks about the first time she took a trip with Epstein. She thinks it was the later part of 2000, and it was to his 66th Street apartment in New York. And when she first went, she, again, didn't have a cell phone with her, and wanted to step out for a little bit to discover New York. She was there for the first time. Without a cell phone, there was no way Epstein and Maxwell could reach her. When she returned back to Epstein's townhouse, they were frantic. They were pissed, saying, "Where were you?" So from that day forward, anytime she would travel with them and go there, she would be on the 54, what was it? On a fifth floor bedroom in Epstein's house where there was an intercom, and that's how he would summon her if he wanted her. Again, Virginia talks about the media perception of how the girls were being kind of viewed by Epstein. So specifically, Epstein victimized women and basically turned it around and said that they were lucky to find themselves in his surroundings and in this type of surrounding. She's flat out saying, "I don't dispute how it felt nice to sleep under sheets made of, premium Egyptian cotton, not low rent polyester." But she was also homeless at points. So yes, she's going to be like, you know what? Did it feel good to be able to sleep in a comfortable bed?
I don't think she ever
did.
I don't think she ever got the right options. She never had, anything great on the menu.
Yeah.
But I thought of her redemption. It's her kids. Has she flashed back to her kids yet? I mean, I guess their future's in question now, but she definitely loves her kids.
Oh
I'm
my
sorry
gosh.
if I'm jumping ahead too far.
Nope, you're good. But these like wonderful things that were just like kind of tangentially, I just butchered that word. But connected, yes, thank you. But connected to all of this came at a cost. Living in a pedophile's world, and Epstein and Maxwell would solidify their power over her. But they also, again, so they know what they were doing. They would sometimes act very parent-like or like a parental figure, in kind of just the right way. So, for example, Maxwell, let me teach you how to do makeup, how to dress, getting your hair cut, like girly things that she would like. Even making the gesture of getting Virginia, a new CD that just came out of her favorite song and giving her a cell phone. It's like things can't always be 100% bad. They have to sprinkle in the good.
Which mother is kinder? Which mother is nicer? If I'm given these two options and I know I need a mother. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I keep doing that.
No, but that's an excellent point, because if you have two shit situations,
and that's all you know.
Yeah. She talks about Little St. James. That is one of the islands that has 3 private beaches where Epstein would bring her. And she says, if it weren't for what happened there, that would be paradise. When Virginia wasn't servicing Epstein there, she would actually be able to, for some time, enjoy the beautiful island. Epstein would also, again, tell her things like, give her the compliments of things she was so desperate to hear as a child. Like he would say, you're smart, you're full of potential. And for somebody like her, coming from where she came from, like kind words like that meant so much. But it was, what cost was it coming with? Let's see. So one of the things, okay, Zach, I really want to know your opinion on this. One of the things that Virginia says in the book is, I have no evidence to prove this, but I always questioned if Epstein was a victim of molestation growing up. She tried to ask him once, but he cut her off. And then when he was once under oath, he was asked if he'd been abused as a minor, and he refused to answer, asserting his constitutional rights not to incriminate himself. Virginia says it wouldn't lessen the awfulness of what he did, but it might help explain it. And I was like, that is a very interesting point.
I have a whole weird answer for you. It's more adjunctive research. It's interesting though. So I used to host poetry readings in Denver as Henry Alarm Clock, and in those years I met basically everyone. I mean, people you don't remember 20 years later, and So I saw this video of this woman who says she's Jeffrey Epstein's niece, named Anya Vick. She was on, do you know who Sean Atwood is? She was on Sean Atwood's podcast, and she was talking all about how her family are members of the cult of Baal, and that they're like abused as a matter of course, and that child sexual abuse is just sort of part of being a member of worshiping Baal. So that's this whole tripped out thing. But in a short answer, like, yeah, probably. I mean, probably things don't just come out of nowhere. So probably it was, inspired by something that happened to him. I can send you that video too. But the weird thing about it is I feel like I met this person because she used to live in Denver. And when I was watching the video, I was like, wow, I think I actually met this person, but I couldn't remember for sure. But I had this image of having it. So I sent her a letter on Instagram or whatever it was. She didn't respond. Maybe that's good. But yeah, so I mean, I guess like things don't come out of nowhere. So whether or not the whole cult of Baal thing is true, there's got to have been something before Epstein to cause Epstein, to cause his erratic behavior.
Yeah. No, good point. Interesting. So I do see everybody in the chat, and I am watching that as we're going along. There's so much to discuss, so I'm really just trying to plow through and give you guys a bit about this book, and yeah, we can go from there.
They're all saying like, can't that guy stop talking about? No, go ahead.
No, they are not going after you. I have a very kind community. I would never.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm on your side.
And that's the only side to be on, so just saying. So Virginia talks about, let's see. So being on the island, Epstein had a personal chef, Adam Perry Lang. And he'll come up later, way later in the book. She says, he never stared at me the way all these other men did. He just looked at me like a human being. He would sneak her food when Epstein wasn't, around, because Epstein wanted his girls very thin, and he had an approved menu for them, which was basically nothing. So Chef Lang would give her pizza and a beer after she had finished servicing Epstein or another guest. And again, Epstein was not aware of that. This was around the time that Epstein expanded what he expected Virginia to do. He also began to trust her more. She talks about when they were back in Florida, he showed her a hidden doorway, and she never knew that was there. And behind that, when he got in that hidden doorway, there was hundreds of photos of young girls tacked up on the walls. They were all naked, underage, and the images were raunchy. And there was a stack of shoe boxes in the corner that held the overflow. And she says he didn't speak, but he had a smug look on his face. We will hear more about that room and those pictures later. Maxwell began to trust Ghislaine a little bit more too, because now Ghislaine was now
Virginia. Maxwell began to trust Virginia.
What did I say?
You said Ghislaine.
Oh boy, thank you for catching that. So Ghislaine began to trust Virginia more, and basically said, hey, bring some other girls here. So basically recruit. And she was given kind of what to look for, a breakdown. And it says the recruits had to be on the edge, basically vulnerable, that they would submit to sex in exchange for money. Virginia had a script. She would say, oh, I work for a billionaire who has a taste for beautiful young girls. He has contacts in acting, modeling, the art world. He'd love to make your dreams come true. Come meet him. It was like a pyramid scheme. One girl would come and be paid $200. Next time she would bring a friend, she'd be paid $400, so on and so forth. Virginia was completely reliant on Jeffrey Epstein at this time, not only for rent, but for validation. And she says, quote, "So I began to do the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I drafted other girls into Epstein's sickening world. I targeted girls who said yes. And it only proves how good I'd become at spotting those who are the neediest. The faces of the girls I recruited will always haunt me. I know their pain, and I will never get over playing a role in causing it," end quote. Just heartbreaking, heartbreaking. Maxwell and Epstein wanted Virginia to get a passport so she could travel internationally. And wouldn't you know that they were so kind to help her through that process? Right before Epstein.
Photos of you naked.
Yes, you just got to that part. I was about to say, yeah, for Epstein's 48th birthday, Ghislaine was like, all he wants of you is photos of you naked. And a few hours later, Ghislaine took her out to the patio, had her take off her clothes and pose for the photos. And Virginia says she soon realized she'd be joining all those other girls in Epstein's trophy closet. So now
a winner coming up here, Tony Figueroa.
Yep. So Tony Figueroa, an old boyfriend from middle school, came back into the picture. He showed up at her apartment one day, saying he'd been trying to track her down. So she met up with him outside so that Michael wouldn't find them together. Virginia couldn't talk to Michael about Epstein, but she could talk to Tony about it. Tony wasn't thrilled about what she was doing, but he didn't blame her for being basically in a fucked up situation. But Virginia and Tony went from being friends to lovers again, and Michael ended up finding that they were back together when he walked in on them one night, and he was crushed. So Michael left, and not long after that, Tony moved in with Virginia. This was at a point where Virginia was turning more and more to drugs and drinking to kind of numb everything. Xanax, weed, alcohol, dropping acid, as well as a slew of other drugs. Still, Epstein is still promising, yes, I'm going to introduce you to a real massage therapist. I'll get you that. And one time he did introduce her to a male massage therapist where she says she learned a lot, but a lot of times it was female, and then it would ultimately turn sexual. And that's when Virginia was like, this whole thing was a setup. Like, this was not a massage therapist teaching me anything. It was just a complete setup by Epstein. Epstein and Ghislaine began lending out Virginia to their friends, saying she was, in her kind of massage training phase. Virginia talks about a billionaire number one and his pregnant wife, who she does not name. And the next morning, Epstein said, how did it go? And yeah, it was just like she had all these things that were required to be done. She talks about as the months went on, there'd be many men she would have to service. When Epstein would say, here's a client of mine. She was never really introduced to a lot of these men by name. She would only learn of who they were years later when she would see photographs of them or see them on TV and realize they were Epstein's associates. And there was one point where she returned from a trip from servicing some of the other men that Epstein had sent her to, and she was greeted by Epstein with him saying, "We're proud of you." And it's, again, like those things where he knows that's like validation in life is what she's seeking, yet he's like, so he knows when to put that in there. So Epstein began placing more trust in Virginia, now requiring her to travel alone with him, even when Ghislaine wouldn't be there. She did get that passport and talks about being boarding and traveling on the Lolita Express, as we've all come to know when it's been called. And in chapter 13, we get to, Zach mentioned him at the beginning, and his photo is in the book. Prince Andrew. So Virginia talks about how when she met him, Prince Andrew was joining them for dinner. And so Virginia wanted a photo with him. And Epstein was the one that took that photo with Virginia's Kodak Fun Saver camera. And Prince Andrew was asked to guess her age, and he said it correctly, 17 years old. And he said to her, "Oh, my daughters are just a little bit younger than you are." They went to, Virginia talks about the nightclub in London they went to. He had a cocktail, invited her to dance. She says he was a bumbling dancer, and she says he sweated profusely. And Maxwell said on the ride home, "When you get home, you're to do for him what you do for Jeffrey." So Virginia got back, and again, there a lot of details, but that is what it is. And the next morning, Maxwell said to Virginia, "You did well. The prince had fun." And Epstein gave her $15,000 for servicing Prince Andrew. When she got back to Florida, she took that Kodak camera to a 1-hour photo developer in West Palm Beach, and that is the photograph that we've all seen, and it has that watermark date on the photo that says March 13th, 2001. Anything you want to add, Zach, about that?
Well, he was in the Falklands War, and he developed an excess of adrenaline that prevents him from sweating. So that can't be true. He was there for at least an hour and a half.
Stop it. We'll go, as Zach said, we're going to get into that because, Prince Andrew has a lot to say in his defense, or if you want to call that a defense.
Reading this book makes me want to watch that Royal Scandal thing on Netflix and the other Filthy Rich one, too, about Epstein. I don't think I've seen either of those, but then I might just be watching the same details over and over.
Yeah.
Have you seen either of those movies?
So now we're at chapter 14. And again, me and Zach are just kind of touching on, some points here in the chapters. Like Virginia goes into detail with everything. So we're just giving you like the little bits here, right? So Virginia talks about her second encounter with Prince Andrew, which was a few months later. And she was forced to have sex with him again. And here is where Virginia talks about the night Epstein attended. And that was the photo I mentioned earlier in the book that I was like, oh, I hadn't seen that photo. Where she attended Naomi Campbell's 31st birthday party that was being held on a yacht. And that picture was snapped. After this party, a billionaire, so billionaire number 2, had a ride back with them. Epstein said, he was 50 years old, give him a massage. So we all know what happens there. And let's see. This guy actually tried to steal her away from Epstein, being like, "Oh, I can pay you triple of what he does. Come work for me." And Virginia said no. And she told Epstein that this guy had said that. And he had this look like, this gaze at her like he adored her. But in hindsight, Virginia's like, that was the look that he adored, that I was loyal to him. Again, a very manipulative loyal, but that's what that look was. She talks about the third time she had sex with Prince Andrew in the Little St. Jacobs Island, and this time it was an orgy. She had some health complications at this time. She woke up one day after having tenderness in her abdomen and bleeding. She went to the hospital, and Epstein took charge there. She says the doctors talked to him more than they talked to me. She learned that a tiny incision was made near her belly button for an ectopic pregnancy. Epstein told her she suffered a miscarriage, and at one point a doctor said you might not be able to ever have kids. And even with all of this health stuff, Epstein found new ways to abuse Virginia. He would begin to experiment with different instruments of torture on her. She says, because we touched upon earlier that, she was kind of trying to numb herself with drugs and alcohol and whatnot. One visit, he pulled her aside and said she looks completely strung out. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her ribs were visible beneath her skin because, again, Epstein liked his girls very, very thin. She said she wasn't sleeping well and said she was taking cocaine and other drugs. And Epstein said, "You need to clean yourself up, get out of here." So she didn't argue. This was a little bit of a break away from him. She started working at an animal hospital, but she got fired because she kept going there late and making up excuses. But she got a waitressing job. That didn't last long either. The drugs that she had been taking to numb her system, she was kind of stopping one by one, and she was starting to feel a little bit like her old self again. Her and Tony, they weren't in a good place. He had gotten caught stealing, and he'd been having sex with other women. And Virginia realizes, Epstein hasn't reached out to me once. He said how important I was to him, but he hasn't reached out to me. So she got a job at TGI Fridays, making $5 an hour, and then a full-time job at a place called Roadhouse Grill. And everything was going fine for her. But Tony, the boyfriend, came to pick her up one day and stole the tip money when he thought no one was looking. Virginia didn't know that. Her work called her and was just like, we think it was you. She suspected it was her boyfriend and told them, "I will put all the money back." And they said, "No, you're fired." It's at this low point that Epstein calls Virginia to check in. And he said, "Come for lunch. I want to see you." Epstein never approved of Tony and said he could get the police off of her back. Again, because there was this whole theft thing. And he said, "One condition, you have to return to me." She had no job opportunity. And she says Epstein led her to the massage room and she followed. And quote, "That was all it took. I was back under his thumb." End quote. Thoughts, Zach?
Well, heck, there's a lot more to come. I don't know. I guess something you said earlier about how she sometimes speaks of her mother reverently, and that I think applies to her life overall. Like there's bright spots that are just as good as they are. There hasn't been any real success yet. She hasn't really found any heaven yet. So like the heaven that's offered by Epstein, it seems like a heaven. The haven, I suppose, he's offering seems like a heaven.
Yeah. So that's actually perfect for the quote that I have here. So in chapter 15, she says, quote, "Epstein once told me that every girl he had sex with had benefited in one of three ways. Either he gave them money to better their lives, or he helped jumpstart their careers, or he married them off to one of his successful friends," end quote. It just, when coming from nothing and being, the upbringing that Virginia had, like any little opportunity, even though it comes with a whole bunch of negative with it's an opportunity. It's
like she's like surrounded by dark clouds and she's going for any little glint of light.
Yeah. And again, this is a child who she's not able to be mentally against a grown-up Ghislaine, grown-up Epstein, who know what they're doing. Like they're 50 steps ahead of her. How could a child be able to, know what it's just, so
I guess that simple understanding has really been the seed of like hundreds of years of maleficence, in the form of sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And trafficking.
And Virginia is not shy about her feelings on Maxwell. She says she was selfish, certainly, but she was more fragile than Epstein. And especially after Ghislaine turned 40, the insecurity started to emerge. We learned that in the summer of 2022, Maxwell and Epstein said to Virginia, "We appreciate that you've embraced our lifestyle and your devotion to us, and we want you to have our baby." They said they would work out the finances with her. The caveat was that Virginia would have to sign over to Epstein and Ghislaine all legal rights to the child. Virginia would have to travel with the child whenever and wherever Epstein wanted. She would have to put in writing that she and Epstein were not a couple, and the baby would remain with Epstein if they ever had a quote falling out, which it's like, what the hell? Virginia was like, there's no way I'm going to bring a baby into this world, into that world for them to raise, especially, and what if it was female? But Virginia knew she couldn't flat out say no to them because that was too dangerous. So for the first time in 2 years, she began to try to think of a way to escape, kind of buying time to pretend that she was thinking over their offer. After a few days, she said, it's kind of a partial plan. Yes, I will have that. But first, deliver on your promise from day one. Get me formally trained as a masseuse. So just a few days before her 19th birthday, Epstein said he was going to be sending her to Thailand to get trained. There was a school there that would do that in 8 weeks' time. But while you're there, he said there's a particular girl and she fits all of his criteria, and he wants her to be flown from Thailand back to the United States with Virginia. So Virginia basically would need to recruit this specific girl. And it never says how he knew or found this girl.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maxwell made it clear before Virginia left that she wanted to hear regular progress about finding this girl in Thailand. So Virginia says, okay. She gets to Thailand, and at first she stays in her room for 2 days, just kind of eating fried rice and French fries, which, again, she had to be on this really specific diet because Epstein liked thin girls. So now she kind of has a little bit of freedom to do that. But she was also in her room because she was waiting for the phone to ring. Even though she was so far away from Ghislaine, she knew that if she didn't answer that call as soon as it came in, she would be punished. And needless to say, Ghislaine did call. Virginia does go to the International Training Massage School. The techniques that are taught there were going back to the days of Buddha. So it's a very reputable school. So where she was sent is legit. In the book, she goes a lot of detail about the kind of techniques and the traditions of the school. Virginia would spend all of her time after school at the hotel because, again, Ghislaine would be calling to check in. What's your progress on this girl? But soon Virginia's like, you know what? No, I'm going to get bolder, and would not answer the call. She would be out, and Ghislaine would have to leave a message with the front desk if Virginia didn't pick up. So needless to say, Ghislaine was not happy. Virginia, when she would respond, would say, no, I haven't found her yet. School is keeping me busy. I promise I will, but never had any attention. Virginia says she felt free for the first time in forever, including getting to know interesting new people her own age. Which, Zach, I don't know about you, but this is just something an average, you go through life meeting new people and having that exciting, I'm in middle school, I'm in high school, I'm in college, or I'm out of, and she's just having that now for the first time in her life.
Yeah, that's quite a barometer.
It's just something that we all take for granted as just part of growing up, but she was never afforded that.
It's like she's looking for diamonds in a trail of mud or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of meeting a diamond in the rough, if you will, she talks about in chapter 17 the night she met Robbie, her husband. Within a few days of friendship, they kissed. He said to her, how are you able to afford your living accommodations? And Virginia told him everything. And a week into knowing each other, he proposed. So they got married on October 16th, 2022, 10 days after meeting. Per Robbie's request, she was to call Epstein and say, it's over. And she did. She called him. She was afraid. And what she said to Epstein on the phone was, quote, "I fell in love and got married, Jeffrey. I'm never coming back," end quote. He paused and said, quote, "Have a great life," end quote, and hung up. And that was that. She says she wouldn't speak to him again for more than 5 years because we all know, yeah, he comes back up. So after the wedding, Virginia had to move out of the Royal Princess Hotel. She also had to quit the massage school because now she couldn't afford to pay for the rest of it on her own. She'd only completed 2 of the 5 levels of instruction. Her and Robbie went on a honeymoon. She then got to learn more about him, his life, his upbringing, and then she slowly opened up to him about her upbringing and the abuse she suffered. Because again, she told him about Maxwell and Epstein, but now she's talking about all of the abuse she suffered her whole life. Robbie was from Australia, so that's where they went together. They were staying with his parents initially, and that's when Virginia realized she did not know how to do basic adult things because no one had ever taught her. And his parents were amazing, and they taught her how to do just simple adult tasks. Virginia was, at this happy and joyous point in her life, but also struggling to come to terms with like this new existence. She says her sex life, for example, she had trouble enjoying herself with Robbie because all she knew was kind of her sex life with Epstein and all these other monsters and being kind of raped by all these other men and being forced to service them. But now she's with somebody it was just such a different world that she didn't know how to adjust. And she would have a lot of flashbacks. And she kept a lot of those from her husband at first because she felt she was so damaged. But he would constantly say to her, "We're a team. We're going to deal with this together." They didn't have much money, but they did eventually get their own place. They did fight quite a bit because he worked a lot and she would kind of sleep in and, as she would say, act like a child. Her dad comes back into the picture. So she calls her dad to say, "Can you sell my car back in the States, put my stuff in storage, and wire me the money that you get from selling my car?" Well, he only sends her $500. Again, it was just another example of her father taking advantage of her. Her parents were getting divorced. So, okay, Zach, this was brought up in chapter 19, and it was just dropped in and then never really discussed. And I want to know if you picked up on it. She says, my parents were getting divorced because my mom found my dad liked to wear women's clothes.
I did notice that. Yeah.
I wanted more information. It was just dropped in and then moved along.
Maybe by the time she got that news, she was like already done with her parents to the degree that she didn't really want to find out any more details.
Right. I guess my thought is like, wait a minute. Out of all the shit your dad did, your mom is upset with him that he wore, like, that's the line.
And have we already gone over the conflict between Robbie and her dad? Or is there still more coming?
That's coming up.
Okay.
Let's see. So Virginia now in Australia with her husband. She still had a Xanax habit and she was running low on pills. The thing is, Robbie didn't know that she was using. She also had an eating disorder that she had developed in childhood, and that was only more encouraged by Epstein, who again liked his girls on a diet and to look really thin. Contrast to Robbie's family, who's just a genuine, average, loving family who loves to cook, loves to eat. And it took Virginia years to kind of immerse herself in that, which it sounds so simple, but it was so different than what she'd been accustomed to and taught against basic things like that. Virginia was afraid to publish her phone number because even though she had a new last name, in the back of her mind, she was afraid Epstein and Maxwell maybe they could find her if they wanted to. So she really wanted to take every precaution. The first few years of marriage was tough because she felt she couldn't really trust anyone, including her husband. She would even just get angry at her husband, saying, you don't have my back. You don't understand. I truly can't count on you. Again, it's based on what she's been through. It's like testing the water. It's like a very clear psychology, like the way she's acting out. It's like she's testing. Is he gonna leave like everybody else? Is he gonna, which is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to read. In 2005, they left Sydney, Australia, moved to Blue Bay on the Central Coast. Virginia was working as a receptionist at this time. And one night she says to Robbie, she hadn't gotten her period in 2 months, and it turns out that they were pregnant. They had their first child, a son named Alexander. So they moved closer to Robbie's parents so that they could be involved with the child. When Alex was 5 months old, she realized she was pregnant again, which I'm like, girl, oh my God. But you know what? She, amazing, because there was at one point, I didn't make the note of it, but it like stuck in my head. Epstein, like, do you remember when he made the statement to her, like, you're going to be an excellent mother?
No, I guess it doesn't sound unlikely though.
Yeah. It's like, dude, what the fuck? But then
I think I do remember it.
But then she had that like health scare where the doctor said she probably wouldn't be able to have kids. So it's like, on the one hand, it go through all that traumatic bullshit, and then to like be blessed with like being able to have their son, and then finding out she's pregnant again. Like, she deserves the happiness. But she found herself missing her parents. She says, or at least the parents I wished I had. So she said, Zach, this is what you were saying. She said to Robbie, she was thinking of inviting her dad to come meet their son.
Oh, yes.
Robbie was hesitant because of what he did to her. But Robbie realized how much this meant to Virginia, so he said, okay. So so Virginia's dad does come visit, and there's a photo in the baby book of her dad putting a beer bottle to her son's lips. This was very triggering for Virginia, but she wanted so badly to have like the tight family, like that the image of what she wanted to be a close family. So she just kind of let it go.
It's like she was trying to fold her father into this perfection of a family that she felt she had found, and like just reunite all the families into health and happiness.
Yeah. So this was the first visit of her father. There'll be another one that we'll get into that. But one afternoon in 2007, the phone rang. Virginia says she picked it up, and it was Ghislaine. And she says, I can't believe this, but after everything Jeffrey's done for these girls, he's being investigated. Have you been contacted? Virginia says she hasn't. Maxwell said, you'll be taken care of if you refuse to cooperate with investigators. And says, if you need legal help, we're here. Virginia promised she wouldn't speak to anybody. And she says, I've started a new life, Ghislaine. I just want to be left alone. Well, a few days later, Epstein calls her. Again, remember, she took so much liberty to not publish her phone number. She has a new last name, but they were still so easily able to track her. Epstein tried to be nice at first, acting like friends. And then he said, I'm having my lawyer tape this call. And one of his attorneys introduced himself on the phone, saying that investigation was going on into Epstein, and it was based on allegations made by women who worked as strippers, prostitutes, and were drug addicts. That was their words. Epstein says, has you talked to anybody? Are you going to talk to anybody? And she says, no. Like I told Ghislaine, I'm not saying anything to anyone. Epstein repeated what Ghislaine had said, we'll take care of you. If you refuse to cooperate, if you need any legal advice or anything, we have your back. And Virginia says, I don't need any help from you, Epstein. A few days later after that, the phone rang. It was a man who said he was with the FBI, and then said that she had been identified as one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, asking questions like, have you ever had sex with him? And much more graphic questions I won't repeat. The man says photos of her had been found in his Palm Beach house. Virginia wasn't sure if that was actually an FBI agent or if it was someone testing her from Epstein's camp. So she just said, this isn't a good time. I have nothing to tell you, and hung up. Let's see. Virginia now talks about how 2 years before Epstein and Maxwell tracked her down in Australia, the stepmother of a 14-year-old girl had called Palm Beach Police Department and suspected that her child was being molested by a wealthy Palm Beach resident. So when we're jumping back in time here and this is at the beginning of chapter 21, Virginia is now kind of saying that this is what kind of started the ball rolling into the investigation into Epstein and Maxwell. And she talks about how she learned about this, how she read the 87-page indictment report, and she recognized so many things about herself that was described of this other victim. And that is reviewed in the book. And it's very specific and very graphic. Let's see. Police had done an undercover surveillance of Epstein's place after the allegations with this 14-year-old girl, and they were secretly collecting contents from Jeffrey Epstein's trash. And among them, they would find like carbon copies of handwritten phone messages that chronicle the steady stream of girls who'd been coming to work in his house. Like, idiot. Like, he's just so stupid. Over the next 13 months, investigators were able to track down more than 30 victims, and each one of them was able to point to another victim. An employee of Epstein's had said that he routinely received 2 or 3 massages a day from different girls. And when asked how young they appeared to be, the employee would just say he felt they were very young. October 20th, 2005, a police execute a search warrant on Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. They somehow knew that Epstein, he was tipped off. He knew they were coming because a lot of things were missing. Computers were removed, but they were able to seize the photographs. You remember we talked about that kind of hidden doorway? Photographs of naked females in so many had been described in those photos. There was a officer seized a high school transcript of one of the victims, and there were 2 hidden cameras placed inside clocks that were seized, as well as other sex items. And that's one of the things we've heard about for so long is how, was Epstein secretly recording a lot of his friends or connections, clients with these women to then have basically something to blackmail them over. And we're reading in this, right here that yes, he did do that. He did place cameras. Let's see. So now we get into a bit of the legal stuff in the book. A grand jury session in February 2006. All of the girls had been interviewed, would be called to testify. So the goal was to get an indictment against Epstein. And then this was when the defense kind of, when I say defense, meaning Epstein and his team, kind of started the smear campaign against these women. They were being photographed at their house. They were being chased by people. It was just, again, completely being dragged. I can't even I'm this is such an understatement through the media, being called horrific things. Some of them reported that they were being contacted by Epstein's camp saying they'd be compensated if they kind of didn't help the police, but also if you do help the police, you're going to be hurt. So the grand jury was scheduled over 3 days in April 2006. However, on the eve of the proceedings, not a single victim had been told when or where to appear. And it turns out that Epstein had been offered a deal. He pled guilty to 1 count of aggravated assault with intent to commit a felony, 5 years probation, in no jail time. So with that, the prosecution basically said to the lead investigator who was working this, like for the victims, was like, oh yeah, why don't you call the victims and tell them that? And he goes, no, absolutely not. And the detective who worked so hard to build this case, it was outraged and wasn't going to let it go. And we learn more about his fight to kind of bring it up a little bit later in the book. But yeah, the victims were not made aware of this deal. So what happened was the detective on May 1st, 2006, in defiance of the prosecution, he prepared 3 arrest warrants and submitted them to the Crimes Against Children Unit of the State Attorney's Office. One was for Epstein, a warrant for 4 counts of unlawful sexual activity with a certain minor in lewd and lascivious molestation. One was for Sarah Kellen, remember his assistant, sought to be charged with 4 counts of principal first-degree unlawful sexual activity with certain minors. And the 3rd arrest warrant was for Haley Robson for lewd and lascivious conduct on a victim under 60 years old, which that was interesting. So now, at present time in the book, it's July 2006, and Epstein is arrested. He posted a $3,000 bond and went home. Again, a $3,000 bond for Jeffrey Epstein, seriously?
Yeah, he's a made man, one way or another. He's got some connections. $3,000.
Add like 10 zeros on the end of that, like for Christ's sakes. So the state attorney presented evidence from just 2 of the victims, and the grand jury returned a single charge of felony solicitation of prostitution. Epstein pled not guilty. Now it's April 2007, and Virginia had her 2nd baby, a boy named Tyler. Tyler, growing up, had some difficulties. Were things that Virginia, as a mom, kind of realized things weren't right. He wasn't walking properly. He was almost completely nonverbal. They enrolled him in a preschool near their home that had speech therapy and occupational therapy. He would bang his head around, like even on the ground, so he had to wear a helmet to protect his head. There was just a lot of challenges as parents that they were going through with their son Tyler. Robbie was in a car accident, and he now couldn't work, and he was the only one working at the time, so that was a whole added level of stress to Virginia and her household. Robbie had said to her, like, you need to see a therapist, because she was still suffering from so many nightmares from everything she had been through. She did find one who was actually helping her son Tyler, and her name is Elizabeth, and she was such a pivotal role for Virginia because she really connected with her and could open up. And she says for the first time she could start to examine in detail events of her childhood. Virginia goes further in the book describing what Elizabeth's work helped her get through. So this is, I want to make a note here, chapter 22. And for like the psychology person in me, like I felt this chapter was very psychology focused in regards to like not just reliving Virginia's trauma, but like the effort of kind of analyzing it and what to do with it and work through it.
And
So
like
I,
how to connect with her as a patient.
yeah. So just because like psychology is my thing, like that, to me, that was my favorite chapter because of like hearing her go through the process and the steps and like having that therapist who she trusts, who's a professional, who truly is there to help her work through her trauma. Like I really resonated with that chapter. Virginia at this point in life was thinking maybe they should move to the United States to be closer to her family. She's again kind of, or what she thinks should be like her perfect family, because they'd been spending so much time with Robbie's family because they were there helping with the children, but Virginia also, to be fair, she had a great relationship with her brothers and she missed them. They applied for visas, but they were denied because they didn't have enough money to support 2 children if they went to another country, but that would be something that they would work through. But in 2008, Virginia received a letter from the U.S. Department of Justice. She was contacted because she was, quote, identified as a victim of a federal offense, end quote. The letter said they were going to be investigating Epstein. Apparently, a lot of women received this letter. This letter included the name of a lawyer who they were encouraged to contact. Virginia thought Epstein, finally he's going to be prosecuted, right? But what they didn't know was that a year earlier in 2007, he entered into a secret non-processor agreement with the government, which canceled the trial that would have been set for January 2008. So once again, another deal. In this one, the sentence was only 18 months in prison. Virginia only learned about this agreement after she contacted the lawyer that she was recommended to call. But not right away, because they talked to her and, interviewed her and got all this information about what happened to her. So Virginia's thinking, okay, I'm going to testify. And then they're like, oh, by the way, there's no trial. The government made a deal. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. He was definitely a connected person.
So the lawyer said, there will be restitution. What you need to decide now is what's your number. And Virginia says, oh my God, that was so Boston right then. Virginia
says,
oh gosh. See, she's yeah. She says she didn't want money. She just wanted justice. But the lawyer said, well, that's too late. But they did say that the only avenue left open to her for justice would be a civil lawsuit. So at this point, Virginia stepped back from revealing her name to the world. In May 2009, she did do a lawsuit, but it was under the name Jane 102. And her lawsuit alleges, again, against Epstein, that he had a sexual preference for underage minor girls, and she was one of them. The encounter talks about her first time with Epstein and Ghislaine, and she goes to further to describe all of the things in the lawsuit that is alleged. So it's not just, sexual assault, battery, exploitation, abuse. It's specifically what happened to say that. So again, this book is very detailed. Well, wouldn't you know, as Zach, had kind of said that, he has a lot of connections here. In July 2009, Epstein was released early from jail.
13 months.
Yep. So he was sentenced to 18, served only 13. And then he was placed on house arrest for another year, which, okay, think of how much money he has. House arrest, is that really a punishment? He might say yes. We say no.
Yeah.
It was later revealed, though, and I didn't know this when I read this, and I was so disgusted, that most of his jail sentence, he had been allowed to leave the jail and go on work release. Did you know that?
I heard that.
Oh, I must have missed that when this happened. Yeah, he was on work release, went to the office for a nonprofit he created. He was allowed to go there up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Well, it turns out he was continuing to molest girls there. And when he got out of jail, this nonprofit he started, gone, dissolved. When he was on house arrest, it was the same way. He was allowed to take frequent trips to New York and getaways to his private island. Talk about house arrest. Virginia, the only contact that she had with Epstein was through lawyers. And in November 2009, she agreed to a confidential settlement. So, anything I missed so far in that, Zach?
No, I'll say this book had the effect of making me pay more attention to this whole situation than I had been, and that the news gives you like a processed, packaged facsimile of the details involved, but this book is like finding all the minutia of all the actuality of all the experience. And I look forward to sharing the links with you after this is done, if you're interested.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, please do, for sure. So, in regards to stepping away from Epstein for a moment and back to Virginia, so at this point, so we're at chapter 23. So she gave birth to a daughter, Ellie, and they moved into a new home. So now at the age of 26, Virginia had 3 small children under the age of 4. I'll stick with my 6 cats, thank you. And she was a homeowner. Once Ellie, her daughter, was born, this is when Virginia realized, that she had talked to her husband about wanting to do more, wanting to stop powerful men like Epstein from victimizing others. And she got really angry, thinking Epstein got away with everything. And again, having a daughter now, it just put so much more into perspective. So now we get to Zach again, what you mentioned earlier. So Virginia's dad came to visit again.
Yeah.
So he started to cross the lines right away. For example, try to hold her hand or insist on dancing with her, tried touching her in the kitchen. And one night he started showing sexually explicit photographs to Virginia and Robbie on his cell phone. Robbie went off and kicked him out of the house. This is not the end of Virginia's dad.
I'm going to read along with this. Which chapter are we in?
Chapter 23.
23. Yeah, I see it. So, yeah, poor Virginia. Poor Virginia. I can't actually seem to find it, but I remember that chapter, and I remember one where Robbie is like in the backyard, and her father comes in, and she's like, "You got to go before Robbie comes." I don't know if we've come that far yet.
That's the next visit.
Okay.
But notice each visit, the dad is like pushing the boundaries a bit more and more.
It's like they're both trying to normalize something abnormal in their own ways. Like he's trying to work his perversion into normalcy. She's trying to work normalcy as like to overrule any perversion.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just I won't hold you up any longer.
No, please, no. It's just like my heart breaks because like you could see how much she just wants a normal relationship, and now that she has children of her own, it's like she's even though like this, her father and mother horrible to her and did horrific things, it's like she still just wants what could be something that's never going to happen, but she just hasn't realized that.
Yeah. Well, I think her kids were like the brightest thing in her whole narrative,
Oh yeah.
So I hope they're okay, and especially Ellie. And I know we haven't come to it yet, but she definitely shows up in a big way, symbolically, I mean, already, but there's like a little moment coming up. I bet you noticed that we're going to get to about the demon child with the muzzle.
Oh, no, I didn't make note of that.
Okay, well, I'm not sure where it is, but it probably hasn't happened yet. So keep going.
Okay. Well, when you come across,
It's like a cartoon or an anime character that Ellie fixates on, and
yeah,
it says a big symbolic resonance to the overall Virginia Giuffre story.
yeah.
So I'll keep an eye out for it.
See what I mean? Where there's like so much in here and like little things where it's like I might focus on this, somebody else might
Sure,
focus on something else. But
it's well constructed for sure.
mhm. So life went on, Virginia, but every once in a while she would stumble across a name or a face that she recognized from back in her day with Epstein. For example, on the TV, on the in the magazine, like all the just she would see them and be like, "That's that person." A journalist named Sharon Churcher was trying to determine Jane Doe 102's identity, which was Virginia. And she did find her through her dad. Virginia did get back in contact with Sharon and said, I'll speak to you off record. When Virginia mentioned Prince Andrew and that she had a picture to back up her story with what she was saying, Sharon booked a flight right away from New York to Sydney, Australia. Virginia weighed the pros and cons about making her story public because right now all the media knew her by was Jane Doe 102. So she realized the moment where she's like, I will come forward, is she stumbled across a photo of Epstein walking in New York Central Park with who else? Prince Andrew. And seeing this photo, she says she was outraged and it was just so arrogant, Andrew at Epstein's side. And because now Epstein was under investigation, so everybody knew this. And Prince Andrew was like, I'm going to fly out and hang out with my friend. So, like, Virginia was outraged. So she said to Sharon, I will go on record. So the first article ran in February 27th, 2001, and it made it very clear that Virginia was Jane Doe. Virginia accepted $160,000 for the photo that was used that Epstein had taken of her and Prince Andrew. And she makes it a point now to say, I didn't understand that taking that money for a table publication for an interview or for use of that photo completely discredits the story, even if the story is entirely true and accurate. She did not know that at the time, and she says, since then, I have never been paid for an interview that I have done. Several days later, the Daily Mail published a second story based on Virginia's with Sharon. Let's see. After those two stories ran, March 9th, 2011, Ghislaine Maxwell issues a statement through her publicist denying, quote, the various allegations about her that have appeared recently in the media, end quote. The statement called these allegations, quote, entirely untrue, end quote. Epstein, he remained silent. March 17th, 2001, the FBI interviewed Virginia for the first time about Epstein. It lasted hours. She had to talk about all that she had experienced. She was showed photographs of men's faces and asked if she recognized them or had been trafficked to any of them. And Virginia did identify several men. Robbie insisted on being by her side during these interviews, which I don't know, Zach, I have a lot of mixed feelings about that.
I want to like him. I mean, I hope he showed up for her when she needed him to the most. But I've seen some pictures of like black eyes, and it doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
But what were you gonna say about that?
It's I feel like she might hold back because, and she even says, Robbie, again, she doesn't say, I want you with me. He insists on being there. So right away, I'm like, it's not your choice, Robbie. But
I
then again,
feel like
Virginia
she
allowed it.
just kind of connects with this type. I mean, not like she ought to or anything, but she sort of has like a radar that that's her understanding of what's a paternal figure, maybe, or like a protection, and she
Yeah.
just kind of gravitates to it. But
Me.
I'm not trying to blame the victim here. I feel like that's just a weird thing that happens to anybody's psychology based on their influences. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he might have meant well, just like I'm here for support if you need me.
And it
Um,
seems like the times that she mentions where he gets upset is when she shows him too much of the reality of like the Epstein thing. So maybe,
yeah,
I mean, I don't want to forgive him for it, but maybe that was a trigger. Like when it all became really public, maybe that's what sent him off the deep end.
yeah. Because he gets really upset in these interviews when Virginia describes being passed around from guy to guy. And then Robbie was mad that he didn't know some of the graphic details discussed in the interview. And Virginia was like, I was
I
trying to
was trying to
protect.
spare you, buddy.
I know it's like, Robbie, it's not about you. But like, you could see it's like how she's doing this long interview. And if he's being upset and being angry, like, is she gonna really want to say? I don't know. I have mixed feelings of it, but that's just me.
Like she wouldn't want, she's already done it in the interview. Would she want to do it in her private life too? Is that what you're saying? Like she's already aired it in its
No, like,
public place?
no. I For me, I meant like, if the FBI is saying tell us everything, and she's there trying to do that, but Robbie, your husband, your spouse is there,
He
and
shouldn't be
he's
in that room.
getting physically angry. You might want to be like, oh, gee, I'll leave that part out.
Sure, yeah, good point. I hope he wasn't in the room with her when she was interviewed.
That's what it says. He
It
insisted on
does seem
being there
that.
next to her. And that's the word too. He insisted. Again,
Mm,
she's allowed it, but I need to move on because it
that's
just
interesting. Yeah, go move on though. But that's interesting.
so the next day after that interview, the FBI went to their home in Virginia, handed 20 photographs to them taken during the time of Epstein and Maxwell, of her time with them. And that infamous photo with Prince Andrew was among one of those photos. So there's an attorney, Brad Edwards. He's talked about it quite a bit in this book. Now we're on chapter 24. He's a Florida lawyer who helped Sharon find Virginia. So he filed a lawsuit challenging the legality of the federal government's non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. He believed that the agreement that basically okay, so he's basically going on an act that was passed in 2004, the Crime Victims' Right Act.
Non-prosecution. Oh, sorry.
So this act says that
I see.
victims of crimes have the right to meaningfully confer with prosecutors in cases brought against those who victimize them. With that being said, Epstein's victims had not conferred with prosecutors prior. They'd been left completely in the dark about that plea deal. So he's filing this lawsuit challenging that. The lawsuit was filed in 2008, and it was on behalf of two unnamed women. Virginia wanted to join that, so she was now known as Jane Doe number 3. Virginia, let's see. Okay, so she says she wanted to be a part of this, and the attorney that was working with these women said this lawsuit was seeking to invalidate Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, so that one of the most dangerous child could finally be charged and tried for all of his crimes. And that's when Virginia learned that Epstein had already made 16 out-of-court settlements with other victims, similar to the one that Virginia had agreed to as well. So again, she's thinking, I'm just one person who settled with him, but no, there were so many others, which says a lot. So Virginia found a new therapist in September 2001 that she liked, a psychologist in her 70s named Judith Lightfoot. In her intake note, and the reason I bring this up is her intake notes were part of Virginia's court file, and Virginia has a copy of that. And she describes the intake process in this book, how she also suffers from PTSD. And Judith is really helpful in kind of reframing and rethinking about her past traumas. Let's see, at the end of 2013, in the summer, Virginia and her family sold their house and they began the process of moving back to the U.S. They moved to Titusville in East Central Florida. They lived close to her brother, Dani. And this was also convenient because it was 3 hours away from the law office of Brad Edwards, the one who was filing this lawsuit on behalf of those 3 victims, Virginia being one of them. Her brother, Skydie, who she was super close with, actually moved in with Virginia and her family with his girlfriend. So her dad, Virginia's dad, moved back to Florida from California. And she says, again, wanting the best and wanting to seek the type of relationship she was hoping, this would be an opportunity for my kids to grow up and know their grandpa. And we'll get back to that. So Virginia, let's see. So they got another attorney on board. I'm probably going to butcher his last name, David Boyce.
I was saying Bowies. I don't know either.
Yeah. I was hoping you would know, but that's okay. He was brought on to help with any counterattacks that Epstein and his team would do, which they did. So there's that. Virginia. Oh, okay. Yep, Zach, this is a bit about what happened here. So with her dad. So Virginia talks about her father and one event in her attempt to make peace with him. The family went on a Busch Gardens amusement park trip, and Robbie had said to Virginia, like, I don't want you to be alone with your dad, which I'm team Robbie on that, I will say. But
I'm not sure where we are, but has he yet apologized? Because that's on page 242.
No, we're on chapter 25.
At one point, her father apologizes, or 25, yeah.
Did I go past that?
Well, I don't know. I can't see where the the vacation is, but he apologizes and he says, oh, I lost it. I'm sorry for what I did to you, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. I'm sorry for what I let Forrest do to you. It was wrong. You were just a kid. You're my baby girl. I always want you in my life. I'm so sad that I put you through everything that you went through. So it's like he's really come all the way around, but then he fucks up again, as I recall. But you get back to your narrative, because I'm sure we're gonna catch up with each other.
So yes, Robbie said, "Don't be alone with your dad." During this Busch Gardens amusement park outing, Robbie hates roller coasters, but Virginia likes them, and her dad likes them. So the two of them.
It is actually at the Busch Gardens that he says, "I'm sorry." So we are caught up. Sorry.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I see that. Okay, so Zach just caught up on that. So it's at this point Virginia realizes, okay, I need to tell my brothers what Dad did. So she took precautions. She had taken precautions, not leaving her kids alone with him, especially Ellie. But both of her brothers had daughters, and she felt they needed to know this too. So she told them. Neither one of them wanted to believe it at first, but then they could see in her eyes that she wasn't making this up. So the older brother confronted their dad first. He neither confirmed nor denied what he had done to either son. When the dad disappeared with Skydie's daughter at a sports game, Skydie's dad was, so Skydie's daughter at a sports game. Skydie said, "Don't ever walk away with my kids again. And you know why, right?" And then the dad just kind of stared back with a blank stare. Dani told their dad he would never see the granddaughter again. So the dad showed up at Dani's wife's workplace, cornered her, and blocked her exit. And he said, "I know where she goes to school, yelling and threatening, you can't take her away from me." Okay. So Dani called the school and said,
Bears.
Yeah. So the dad should never be allowed to pick her up again. And that was the end of Virginia's dad and her brother Dani's relationship. And she says, to this day, they do not speak. Well, Virginia's dad, instead of taking accountability, decides, I'm going to be mad at Virginia for this. So let's see. So Virginia got a telephone call that so again, because there's this whole investigation with Epstein, there was evidence that Epstein paid Virginia's dad some money back in 2000 when she was first being trained by Epstein and Maxwell. Upon hearing this, because of course Virginia told Robbie said he could not restrain himself anymore in front of her father and said, I want to kill him. So Virginia and Robbie decided to move, heading to Colorado. She called her dad and said, "Dad, I know Epstein paid you off." He was silent, and then he started yelling at her for being an ungrateful daughter. So this next moment, Zach, you mentioned this very earlier on. Do you want to describe the situation where he showed up in the truck ready to fight and Robbie in the back?
Let's see. I opened the front door and I could see from the way he was swaggering toward me that he was ready to fight. But I put my hand on his chest and told him he wasn't coming in. "Dad, I need you to stop," I said. "Think for a second. Do you want your grandchildren to see you and Robbie down on the floor trying to kill each other with blood everywhere? Because that's what is about to happen. If you don't turn around right now, I'm calling the police." I must have scared him because he stopped pushing me. I could see Dad looking over my shoulder. Oh, wait. Dad looking over my shoulder. Oh, registering the lack of furniture in the living room. "What's going on?" he asked. "We're moving," I said. "You're never going to see us again. This is the last time." And then he asked, "Can I see my grandchildren?" He stammered. "No," I said. "No, you can't." Then he starts sobbing. He says, "You're my baby girl. You'll always be my only baby girl. Who's going to take care of me?" "Dad," I said, "Robbie doesn't know you're here. You need to get in your car and you need to go before he finishes cutting the grass. Because if he comes in and finds you here, I won't be able to hold him back." Dad's eyes darted around as if he was listening for the sound of the lawnmower. Then he turned, walked to his car, and drove off, and that was the last time I ever saw my father.
Long time coming.
Yeah, and I guess she doesn't even bother telling. I mean, maybe it happened, she didn't record it, but a few minutes later, Robbie put the lawnmower in the garage. We were leaving it for the realtor, and then they're off to Penrose, Colorado.
Yeah, I kind of wish she had said like, did she tell Robbie? I mean, eventually, she wrote this book, so he knows, but
I think they did a good job. Virginia and her collaborator. There must have been a lot of sessions and notes and interviewing and selective editing, because also the caliber of the people, the characters that she often doesn't name. There would be a lot of libel issues and danger, physical, life or death danger.
Yeah. So now that the father is out of the picture, so Virginia Virginia and her family were moving, and they rented a house 2 miles away from Virginia's mom. So Virginia really tried to want to have a relationship with her mom again. And we'll touch upon this a little bit. So Brad, the attorney that's working on behalf of the victims, decided to file the motion the day before New Year's Eve 2014. Well, someone wrote about it on December 31st, and it unleashed a firestorm in the press. Ghislaine Maxwell was listed in the complaint, and she issued a statement a few days later from her publicist identifying Virginia by name. So again, she was just Jane Doe number 3 in this, but Maxwell outed her and called her a liar. And the statement began by saying Jane 3 is Virginia Roberts. And then the statement went on to say that all these allegations that are being made are not true. Sharon Church, that reporter that initially, or investigator that initially said she was going to work with Virginia. Virginia said, yes, I'll go on the record. So her going back. Well, Sharon decided on January 13th, 25 to write a misleading news story about Virginia's time with Prince Andrew. And she called them diary entries of a teen sex slave from notes, handwritten pages of notes that Virginia had made about her time with Andrew. Virginia was now absolutely disgusted by Sharon because she was essentially just trying to sell out. Any good that she had done in reporting this was now just gone. So Virginia, again, now lives close to her mother and her mother's new husband, Stan, and they're spending time together. And it's a positive thing because her kids are now growing up and being a part of this and getting to know their grandmother. However, as Virginia's kind of personal life with her family was going well, on the outside, it was a shit show. So again, people were trying to break into their house all the time. The paparazzi would follow the family because, again, Ghislaine now outed that Virginia is Jane Doe 3. So Virginia sat down and did an interview with ABC, but that interview never aired because they reached out to Epstein's attorney and Buckingham Palace. And then Virginia just says, for whatever reason, the interview never aired. I mean, we all know. Yeah. July 2015, Virginia and her family decided to move back to Australia. Robbie's dad had prostate cancer, and Virginia had actually been diagnosed with asbestos. So,
asbestosis.
So we're going to jump a little ahead to chapter 29. So the book talks about Ghislaine Maxwell on the stand during her depositions. And the book goes into detail on it, but to put it very simply, it recaps how, and this is shocking, right? Ghislaine would dodge questions, ask what simple words meant, and then she'd get agitated if the attorney wasn't looking directly at her.
I have to make a moment for 28.
Yes,
when chapter 28, when her mother gives her the embroidered pillow or whatever it is that says, always my daughter, now too my friend, that made me cry because I could feel how that would have felt, you know, and like not that like this the sentimentality of it made me cry, but just the way to have this damaged, tortured relationship and yet still have this shred of family love in it. It's just dark, but we're on 29 now, and I'm still trying to find that reference to the anime character. But
okay. No, so I want to touch upon though what you mentioned though. So I took it differently. I can see how you would take that touching moment the way you did.
Because I feel like the mother was trying to be good in that gesture of giving, but
yeah. And it's what Virginia has wanted her whole life.
Yeah.
I think
Here it is.
I'm always told I'm the mean one. But I'm just like, too little, too late.
She says, this is what I want for us, she says, and her eyes were wet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in that moment, I thought, this is probably the closest to an apology I'm ever going to get. So I don't know, that just hit me hard for some reason. Like, not that I forgive anyone. Mm-hmm. It's just that the sad, loving torture of human existence or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I took it as like, too little, too late, that shit passed. But
Well, yeah.
take myself out of it, that would mean the world.
I was just trying to identify with like the narrator, you know, and how
Yeah.
that would have felt. And I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, Discerning Light says it good right here. Twisted love.
yeah, that's it.
That very well said.
Not that we should aspire to a twisted, you know,
No,
love
no.
if we're looking for love. It's just kind of sad.
So, all right. So a few weeks before trial, Ghislaine and her attorneys, along with Virginia and her attorneys, had actually reached a settlement. And Virginia says she's not allowed to discuss the terms of the settlement because they're confidential. So there's that. So that's not the end, though, right? So Virginia talks about, so now we're in chapter 30. While in Epstein and Maxwell's world, they strategically kept girls from forming alliances or even friendships with each other. And again, very strategic. Well, now all of these victims are coming together each other and being part of this lawsuit and, as we come to know now, movement against Jeffrey Epstein. So Julie K. Brown, an investigative journalist at the Miami Herald, she was digging into Epstein's case, and she was prompted partly because of Alex Acosta's position to Donald Trump's cabinet. The book goes into detail about that and why that was a big, big issue in this. She was determined, so Julie K. Brown was determined to get the sealed court records of Virginia's defamation case against Ghislaine Maxwell unsealed. Virginia's attorney said that's fine with us because they want more light shining on this. So Virginia sat down for an interview with Julie Brown, and that series was done on Epstein. And needless to say, everyone was seeing this. So in July 2019, Virginia learns that on July 6, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on federal charges related to sex trafficking. He had been apprehended after his private jet landed in New Jersey's Teterboro Airport. Yeah, Teterboro. At the same time, he was arrested. Federal agents raided his New York townhouse. They found hundreds, if not thousands, of nude photographs of young-looking women, a safe containing 48 diamonds, $70,000 in cash, 3 passports belonging to Epstein from the U.S., from Israel, and Austria, and one which was expired, and it appeared to be the photo of Epstein, but it included a fake name and a home address in Saudi Arabia. So I know that's kind of something that we talked about. You mentioned very earlier on, Zach, about his.
Yeah, I just watched another. Have you ever seen a podcast by Noor Jasmine? I can't remember the name of the series, but it's like another true crime or just like scandal, like an expose podcast. But she has a whole interesting, brand new episode about Saudi Arabia connections with Jeffrey Epstein, and apparently, like, it goes back to the late '80s. And I'll send you that link. Interesting.
Busy. So now we learn on July 8th, the indictment was unsealed, and it alleged that Epstein and his employees brought dozens of vulnerable girls, some as young as 14, to his New York mansion in Palm Beach home between 2002 and 2005. He's accused of abusing these girls sexually, paying them for money, and then having some of them recruit other girls. So Epstein now faced a maximum sentence of 45 years in prison. At Epstein's bail hearing a week later, he had to complete a financial disclosure form, and it listed his net worth as $559,120,954. This included 6 properties, stocks, equities, and $57 million in cash. Wow. the judge decided there would be no bail for Epstein. And then on July 19th, Alex Acosta resigned from Trump's cabinet. He had, just to put it very briefly, but go down this rabbit hole, and it does say it in the book, he had a role in the 2008 non-prosecution agreement against Epstein.
And I can't help but wonder why she named her son Alex. I mean, that did occur to me. I mean, it's no blame. I don't know if it had anything to do with it.
Did she even know about Alex Acosta and his role at the time?
I thought he was like one of the clients. Maybe he was just a legal wheeler dealer.
I thought he was just legal.
I'm probably reading way too much into it.
Well, to be fair, we don't know who all of the clients are, so nothing's out of the realm of possibilities in my mind. I will give you that, Zach. I
found the thing about the demon anime. It's in chapter 35, so let me know when we get to that point.
Okay. All right, we'll do. We're on chapter 31 now, and so I feel like everybody who's followed the Epstein case, like, in regards to his death, that happens in chapter 31. So you get through a lot of this, and now in chapter 31, if like you're really like, I want to know about this is where it talks about it. So it talks about on July 31st, Epstein was written up for self-mutilation and was put on a suicide watch in a cell. But 31 hours later, that assessment was downgraded to something less restrictive called the psychological observation, and he was returned back to a normal cell. Saturday, August 10th, guards brought him breakfast to his cell. However, they found his lifeless body, a bedsheet tied around his neck. Epstein was dead at the age of 65. Virginia was disappointed because she says this was not how justice was supposed to work with the accused, because he avoided his day of reckoning by taking himself out. Virginia was not happy that he was dead. She was grieving, but she says she was grieving the death of her ability to hold him accountable for what he had done. What a statement.
Yeah.
When the details of his death started coming out, everyone was questioning it, and they still do. They were questioning, did he actually commit suicide or was he murdered?
Is he even dead?
Oh, God. Yeah, he's with Tupac. Investigators would discover that on August 8th, 2 days before his death, Epstein placed his entire fortune into a trust called the 1953 Trust in the Virgin Islands. So this would make it really difficult for his victims to get restitution. On August 13th, 2019, the New York Post ran a photo taken in 2001, so 8 years earlier. And that was the photo that's in this book that I had said to me, I was like, I have not seen that photo. It was Naomi Campbell's 31st birthday bash. So Virginia describes that earlier, but now this photo was going everywhere. It was going, what's the word? Viral. Because Virginia was in that photo, and the article was called Jeffrey Epstein Sex Slave Seen at Naomi Campbell's Birthday Party in 2001. Yeah, and it's very clear in that she's a child at this party.
Everyone knew that was a child.
And a fellow Epstein survivor would later tell Virginia that was the photo that made her break her silence and come forward with her own story, which is just so powerful. So next, so there was a statute of limitations law in New York, but it changed 4 days after Epstein's death. So originally, those who were filing lawsuits had to come forward by their 23rd birthday, but not all victims come. It takes a lot. But now this new statute of limitations temporary law, now victims could come forward up to age 55 to make their claims. This was thanks to what was called, quote, look back window, end quote. It was written into law for 1 year, starting on August 14th, 2019. So victims of all ages could sue even if the statute of limitation had passed. And then, as we know, COVID hit. And because of that, the window was extended for another year until August 14th, 2021. Let's jump back a moment. So August 19th, 2019, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed a document to withdraw the charges against Epstein because he was now deceased. However, the judge realized that the victims had been robbed of something really important in their healing. So on August 27th, the judge said he would give any victims who wanted the opportunity to speak to address for their airfare and hotels. Although it was short notice, Virginia was determined to be there. So she was there, and there were 23 victims that attended and spoke. Virginia did a lot of interviews after this. She talked about what she considers the most important one that she did, which was 60 Minutes Australia. And she decided that her husband and now her two sons, who were 13 and 12 years old, should watch this as well. Her daughter was only 9, so she was too young. But Virginia knew that even though she went by the name Jenna in Australia, remember I mentioned that at the very beginning, people would know her face. They were going to know it was her on TV. And their sons might get asked about it, and she didn't want them to be blindsided. So they watched it. And after the episode aired, she said her son Alex was angry and saying, why did they let that guy get away with hurting so many people? Tyler, however, he was more upset. He cried several times while watching the show, and he couldn't stop hugging Virginia, saying, quote, I'm proud of you, Mom, end quote. That's a teary chapter.
For sure.
And now we get to, so I know this is a long episode, folks. We're getting there. Zach, let me ask you, did you watch the Prince Andrew interview when he sat down with BBC?
Yes, I have, a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is discussed in this book, chapter 33. So if you want to read about the train wreck from Virginia's perspective on it, it's chapter 33. And I would encourage everyone after tonight's episode to go back and re-watch and listen to it, because
yeah, I agree.
What a shit show. Like, all right. So back to the book's recollection of it, Virginia's. She says Prince Andrew sat down with BBC News Night to try to clear his name, and he thought the interview went well. I could totally think in his mind, he thought he nailed that.
He looks really smug too, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, it aired 2 days later, and it was viewed as a disaster. He expressed no regret about his long-standing relationship with Epstein. And do you remember how he said, oh, well, I only saw him one more time in 2010 in person, so I flew to go see him to tell him our friendship was over.
He says, like, I only went there in New York just to tell him that I didn't think it was proper or whatever, some kind of thing like that.
Yeah, I'm breaking up our friendship, but I'm flying there to tell him in person.
And it takes a week or 10 days. You know, I'm very delicate about these matters. I'm royalty, you know. I work up to it very gently. And
yeah, that a very sensitive topic. He denied the allegations against him by Virginia. And he said on the night that she had first been trafficked to him, allegedly, it couldn't have been him because he was taking one of his daughters out for pizza.
Sure, that's what you do.
Bring your child into this.
Ah.
And he says, I have no recollection of ever meeting Virginia, none whatsoever. And then as Zach mentioned earlier, the famous, it couldn't have been me dancing sweaty in the night. Oh, God.
Well, there's a problem with that because during the Falklands conflict, I don't know the exact quote, though.
Yeah, I have the quote. Because he temporarily developed an inability to perspire after enduring, quote, an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when he was shot at, end quote.
He was only there for like an hour and a half. He just came at the worst time possible. Contract that crazy non-sweating disease on so much panic.
God. And the book lays out, like, there has never been any medical documentation to come forward to be like, yes, that was what he's saying is true, by the way. But I think all of us hearing this are like, well, yeah, duh. So, all right, chapter 34. So Virginia talks about she had a bunch of her own health problems. I mean, her health really took a turn towards the end of this book. She had meningitis. She also broke her neck. So she was dealing with a ton of stuff with that. After Epstein's death, Ghislaine Maxwell disappeared. She went into hiding. Even one of her lawyers didn't know her location. Investigators finally used a tracker on one of her mobile phones to a remote location in Bradford, New Hampshire, 156-acre property. So yeah, right, New Hampshire, that's near me. So Zach, I actually have a story for you.
All right.
And everyone. So we know Maxwell was married. I'm blanking her husband's name. Is Scott something? I'm blanking it. But he had a house. They had a house, but it was under his name in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts, I want to say. And it got listed for sale. So the address was made public. So I'm like, take a trip. Yeah. So I did, and there's signs everywhere saying like private property. I'm like, I don't care. And I'm driving through it, and I'm like, I got so close to the house, and then a guard truck came out. Back up.
Oh, shit.
But I got very close to the house, and it was kind of secluded for Manchester, Mass. Like you had to kind of go through woods to get to it, but it was right on the water, the property. And there's pictures at the time. There was pictures of it online, and it was a beautiful property. But I'm thinking, dude, you were married to Ghislaine Maxwell. Like, yeah. So that was my, like, I was really
your personal connection. I suppose every American citizen's probably got some weird personal connection to this case by now.
Yeah. All right. So yes, the FBI, she went into hiding. She was found. FBI showed up, arrested her. She was denied bail. Virginia talks about how those connected with Epstein. It wasn't just Epstein and Ghislaine that were falling. It was a lot of people who were connected to him. People in high positions, businesses, colleges were now getting fired from their jobs. And what do you know? History repeating itself. It's happening again right now. So now we're on chapter 35. Zach, so you have something from chapter 35 too.
Well, she brings up the demon thing right at the beginning, and then there's a conclusion at the end. But the opening salvo is lately she discovered a manga series called Demon Slayer Kinetsu no Yaiba, about a 14-year-old girl and her older brother who have lost their entire family to demons. When the girl becomes a demon too, her brother becomes a demon slayer and vows to transform his sister back into human form. Ellie told me she loved the idea that demons could be rehabilitated and made good again. I was buoyed by her optimism, even as I sometimes struggled to maintain my own. And then you've probably got some more details to give, and I know what the summation will be, but I haven't found the page yet. But anything you've got from 35, it's got to be coming right up.
So the only notes I have from that chapter, like just putting it very briefly, but it gets well discussed in the book, is the lawsuits that were being filed against Prince Andrew and how he was hiding behind castle walls so he couldn't be served. But eventually a judge said he could be served through his U.S. attorneys, and he was. And then the Epstein Victim Compensation Fund paid $120 million between 150 victims.
And
so that was what I took away from chapter 35.
Okay, that's fine. And then at the very end of that chapter, that demon monster made good comes back. It's a Halloween costume or something. Now I threw myself into transforming my beautiful daughter into Nezuko. We got Ellie a kimono and a pair of gita, those traditional Japanese flip-flops with the elevated wooden soles. And this one reminds me so much of Virginia's story. We even found a way to recreate the bamboo muzzle secured with a sash that Nezuko wore to prevent herself from biting anyone. So that totally seems like a metaphor for how you would feel if you had this dangerous information to speak, but it was going to bite someone, and bite you, it'd be a danger, it'd be a fatality, you know? Mm-hmm. So that image of the muzzle tied with a sash kind of just reminds me of how she must have felt, you know, as like a kept victim, or whatever she would be best referred to as, a kept woman, I suppose.
Yeah. No, very well said. Ugh. So we're getting into the final stretch, folks.
One more cool thing, though.
Please, go ahead.
I hugged her long and hard that day. I'd been trying to protect my daughter from the world's ugliness, but she was developing her own ways of protecting herself and passing strength to me in the process. Are you frozen? I guess you're frozen. I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen. Oh, now you're moving.
There we go. Sorry about that. I saw my Wi-Fi thing go down. I was like, not right now.
Did you hear my dramatic conclusion?
I did. I had it up on my phone.
Oh, good.
Sorry about that, folks. Okay. So, chapter 36. So Ghislaine's trial began November 29th, 2021. You're back. You woke up. Yeah. Sorry about that. So Ghislaine's trial began. Virginia was told by the prosecution she would not be testifying because she would be too big a distraction, which that really sucks. And of course, Prince Andrew's camp wasted no time planning a story that since Virginia was absent from this trial, she could not be a credible witness. But there were 4 victims who testified against Maxwell, and they, of course, were slammed and dragged by the media, saying they were only there testifying for financial gain. But Virginia makes it very clear they had already received payment from Epstein's funds prior to this trial starting, so they had nothing to gain testifying in Ghislaine's. In fact, they faced prosecution if they falsely testified on anything. So they had more to lose than to gain. As we all know, Maxwell did not testify on her own behalf. What was that verdict, y'all? She was guilty of sex trafficking and 4 other charges.
Straight to the country club for you, Ghislaine. That's what I hear anyway.
She was acquitted of 1 count of enticing a minor to travel across state lines to engage in a illegal sexual act. So January 12th, 2022, Virginia's case against Prince Andrew got the go-ahead. So her attorneys, his attorneys had tried to argue that he was protected from, oh my God, like what a shitty thing. Again, his attorneys were trying to argue he was protected from liability because of the settlement that was signed with Epstein back in 2009. Really? But the judge rejected that. Like, it's just, tell me you're guilty without telling me.
Prince Andrew, you don't understand.
So the day after that decision, the Queen stripped Andrew of his royal and military ties. On January 19th, 2022, Andrew deleted all of his Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook profiles. On February 15th, 2022, Prince Andrew's, or now not Prince, Andrew's team reached a settlement with Virginia's attorneys, and he agreed to pay her money. That amount is confidential. And he made, like, part of it was like a statement that they each had to make too. And it was kind of like, he was like, yeah, it's in here. His is just very bullshit. Like, I support all victims and blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Andrew.
God. So Virginia, her health continued to just, I mean, bad luck after bad luck. So she got COVID and she ended up in the hospital. And she talks about a lot of the negative thoughts she had in her head because she was so sick, and like her mind was just saying, like, you know, you're being a burden to your husband, to your kids, to your family. You bring stress to them and pain. So she had tried to kill herself by taking pills in the hospital, but she was found and survived.
Doesn't believe that she matters.
Yep. When she got out of the hospital and home, she tried to do it again with pills. And this time it was her son, Alex, that found her. And that broke my heart. But luckily he did find her and she got help. June 28th, so we're just jumping ahead a little bit. June 28th, 2022, Maxwell's sentencing happened. And she was sentenced to 20 years in prison plus 5 years of supervised release in order to pay a $750,000 fine. So lastly, the end of the book, the very last chapter, she talks about some of the names that she discussed throughout this book. And she says, there are names that I also did not and will not name because some she just doesn't know their name. She was never introduced to them by name. It's just a face by somebody who raped her. And others, she knows their name, but will not say that because she fears them. Some of the men that was trafficked, that she was trafficked to, asserted that they would use litigation to bankrupt her, or that, you know, they would cause her or her family harm. So she's just not, some names for her own protection, she's not coming forward with. And then at the very, very end of the book, after all the chapters are said and done, it gives information about where victims can turn to for help. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, National Domestic Violence Hotline, and the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Okay, Zach, was there anything that I missed that stuck out to you that we did not discuss?
No, I think we've discussed it fully. And I look forward to sharing my adjunctive research. It's going to be an article and a couple of YouTube productions.
Awesome. And gosh, we're almost on 3 hours. I honestly feel like we only touched the surface on this. I'm thinking we didn't cover a lot, but as much as me and Zach covered tonight, there's so much more in this book. Zach, would you recommend this book to somebody, yes or no, and why?
I would recommend this book to somebody who wants to understand a little bit more about the machinations or machinations, whichever is correct, of the power dynamic in the Western world and how women are like the unwritten heroes that enable it all through being, I don't know how to make a grandiose statement about it, that the role of women is so much more crucial to the goings on of society than most people understand, and that it's potentially in a very horrible kind of transactional kind of way. So I wouldn't say it's an uplifting book, but it will let you identify with someone who doesn't usually get heard, doesn't usually have a voice, and it's a book that everyone ought to read.
Very well said. Very well said. discerning, like it was reported that she committed suicide.
Yeah.
Do I 100% believe that? No, but that's what's being reported. I want to add,
She was in a car accident
yes,
prior to her death, so there is that reportage.
yes. So in regards to, I would recommend this book to anybody to read. Kind of like Zach said, this is a type of story that typically isn't, they it doesn't always have a voice. And Virginia gave that a voice. I think we we only learned about Virginia Roberts Giuffre at a certain point in her life. There was so much more to it that led to what happened. And for her to be open enough to be like, here's my story, and being that open and vulnerable and raw, like what a gift that she's giving to everybody and sharing
No
her
kidding.
struggles and not hiding behind anything. Like this book is very graphic, and it doesn't, I mean, it puts her in just such a, I don't even know what type of word to say, but I can't even imagine the strength that she had to like go through her life story like this and be like, this happened to me, but we need to say it. And she does. And I think it just goes to show that it's so easy for somebody to sit back and say, well, how could, just being uneducated, how could they, let this get, these are children going up against Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, manipulative adults who know who is vulnerable and who they can prey on. And I think, again, Virginia went through so much trauma before she even met Ghislaine and Epstein. And I think that's, we as a society need to take a step back. And I know, Zach, one of the things that when I was going through the review that I got very angry about was that family outing, that family camping thing where she, the dad calls her a whore and a slut and beats, and then when she says, like in front of all of her extended family, like what you did to me.
No one takes up her cause.
No one. And then he beats her in front of everybody. No one does anything. And then they just act like it never happened. I just see there's so many, you can see how, sorry, I'm trying to say 5 things at once. You can see how there were opportunities where she was failed big time by people. You know what? Things her father did were fucked up. Things her mother did were fucked up. There were other family members who could have did something, but chose not to. But then also you can see how the different predators that she met along the way, like it was just the snowball effect that ultimately once she got to Epstein and Maxwell, oh my God, that's the same person. No, sorry, it's late. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It was the perfect storm of they have the upper hand and they knew it. And she was not, when it comes to victims, she wasn't alone in this. Like there are certain characteristics when she was being told to recruit girls, that was one of the criteria. Find girls that are vulnerable enough where they won't be
on the edge that they're not going to be afraid to. I mean, how do they make these calculations? I guess practice teaches those conditions. I will say, I think that apart from, I mean, Virginia's story is going to be a big part of helping this happen, but I feel like the Epstein situation is going to be the straw that breaks the back of current political malfeasance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so at the time, like you always kind of know you're in history, but it's really just your life. But this is one of those times where I feel like we're participating in history right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess you don't know what's going to happen next, but I feel like it's bound to be resulting from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So thank you, everybody who has stuck with us for almost 3 hours in review of this book. Again, me and Zach recommend this. Everybody pick up a copy. Nobody's Girl by Virginia Roberts. Right. If anybody has any questions or comments, leave them. This video will stay up as they all do. Leave them in there. And Zach, please feel free if you see any, questions or, comments from this. I mean, because you did a lot of research too outside of this book on this. So feel free to, like, if there's any comments on this, jump in and do your magic. So thank you, everybody, for joining. And if you do purchase this book and read it, let me know what you think. I love when people DM me and say, oh, I purchased this book because of your review, or, hey, I bought it and here's my take, or I took something different away from it. Like, I just love that open engagement. So definitely don't be shy with that. In regards to next month's book club, I will put up a poll in a few days, and we'll start voting for December. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Zach, for joining for this month's book club. Very much appreciated for this. So everybody, take care, enjoy the rest of your night, and remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.